I'm here in Washington, D.C. We're 2 days away from a presidential election. It's now being completely dominated by the COVID-19 crisis. But here's the interesting point. Joe Biden very much states the line, there's going to be a long, dark winter coming, and that America needs to lock down further. That's his pitch to the American people. They'll be safer under him. Trump takes the completely opposite view. He says that lockdown leads to economic disaster, leads to mass depression, and leads to vast numbers of people losing their jobs, their security, and their general sense of well-being. He says the vulnerable can protect themselves, the rest of us have to learn to live with it. But I'll tell you what's interesting, at least in America they've got a choice. At least in America they're having a debate, because we are locking down from Wednesday. This has been decreed by Boris Johnson. Guess what? Sir Keir Starmer 100% agrees, as do all the other political parties represented in Westminster. There has to be a vote before this happens. Oh, sure, there'll be a few backbench Tory MPs that will rebel. The rest of them, they get popped off, they get bribed, they'll get blackmailed. So we are heading for lockdown, and there's a growing number of us in the country can see that what lockdown means, even in health terms, is disastrous. You know, I was talking just 2 days ago to a charity in Kent, a diabetes charity in Kent. They've got 100,000 patients that they're looking after. Not a single one of them has been screened since March. So, I mean, goodness knows what that means for amputations, for blindness, and that's just diabetes. Lung cancer diagnoses are down 75%, and the figures for chronic heart condition are not far behind that. Remember, the first lockdown was to protect the NHS. We finished up with 35,000 empty beds in our hospitals. We're going back into that. So I think it's quite possible to say that given the average age of death thus far in the UK is 82 years and 3 months, which is pretty much around average life expectancy. I think it's quite safe to say that what the second lockdown means is that ultimately more people will die of other illnesses because they've not been diagnosed than will die from COVID-19. And I just want to say a word this morning particularly about the self-employed, the sole traders, people running little businesses, people running small restaurants. I really do fear that a second lockdown is going to mean the end for many of them, particularly as Michael Gove this morning has said, well, it might not be a month, it might be longer than that. I do understand that Boris Johnson doesn't want an historical legacy that says that, you know, huge numbers of people died and he didn't act. I know it's fear that is driving him, but frankly, I've had enough of lockdown. I mean, they're almost trying to put us back under house arrest in terms of travelling, and I think there's now a great number of people who think that whether a miracle vaccine is around the corner or not, and I have to say I'm slightly sceptical about that, and slightly sceptical too about whether people would take it, because they're going to say, hey, this is new, this is experimental. So what do? Do we go on locking down again and again and again? Do we as a country literally go bankrupt? Do we see suicides continuing to spike in the way that they are, millions of people unemployed? Or do we say, actually, we have no choice but to learn to live with this? And yeah, we've got to be sensible about hand washing, if we can possibly social distancing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This second lockdown says to me that the cure is now worse than the disease, and the frustration that is being felt out there by people, there is no political voice articulating that. Well, I think that may change very soon.